Hi guys, and we're making part 5 of this. I can't believe we are actually making part 5 of this. And to be honest, I'm kind of glad we're making part 5 of this because I do not just want to make a few parts. I actually kind of want this to be a series where I just keep going and keep chugging with like 20-minute videos. So if you guys want that, just let me know. Maybe send me some texts. I don't know. This was the states of the Americas in around, I'm going to say, the year 1700. But the biggest threat to the Americas that could ever come, that would destroy the continent's balance, a war that would sometimes be called World War Zero, was about to come. This war, of course, is the French and Indian War, or as it's called outside of North America, the 7 Years' War. It was a war that cemented British dominance in North America and started to undermine the French dominance in America. And it eventually even led to the American Revolutionary War. But to learn how this unfolded, you're going to have to look at this map. So I'm going to make a few small changes. I know it's a bit late in the day, just like last time, but later videos are cool, guys. I actually like the later videos a lot, because it means I don't have to record without people bursting in. So this is a map of the Americas, and about the year when the French and Indian War was about to take place. And as you can see, the states of North America was chaotic at the time. There were fights breaking out almost everywhere. And France and the 13 colonies were fighting over the Ohio Valley, a large, little-known strip of land in the modern-day state of Ohio, where many Native Americans lived. However, when a young British colonel from Virginia by the name of George Washington signed a paper in a language that he could not understand, this paper signed his confession for a French admiral shot and killed in the region a couple of days earlier. He was stationed at Fort Duquesne in western Pennsylvania, one of the most dangerous border territories in all of North America at the time. The situation had calmed down in the Latin America, but in North America, it was looking like the two giants were finally about to fight. This is Mapman here, and welcome to History of Colonialism, Part 5. Ba-boom! So, the 13 colonies in France are at war, but this war was brewing for a long time. The 7 Years' War was going to happen either way. No matter what was going to happen, it was just going to happen. And it was destined to happen. The war officially started when England and France declared war on each other. The French allies, the Austrian Empire, who ruled a large territory over Central Europe, joined the war on the French side. To combat this, the German power of Prussia, which is in modern-day Poland and Germany, joined the war on Britain's side. Many smaller German states, including Hanover, also joined on the British side. Now, Hanover was actually a little bit different, because it was actually essentially it was within a personal union with the British, and because of that, it joined the war on Britain's side. Even Sweden took a bit of a leap and joined in the war, reducing itself from its regular neutral state to a temporary powerhouse of the Baltic Sea. Russian one got caught up in the crossfires, having to use themselves as buffer states between France, Prussia, and Austria. Also, what didn't help is that the Russian Empire, another empire that I've overlooked for now, was set out to become a new colonial player. They had recently conquered eastern Siberia and made it to the geographic easternmost point of the Asian continent. This made it very, very dangerous for positions in New Spain, France, and the 13 colonies to uphold. Luckily for the Spanish and French and Austrians, no major power had yet risen out of the Italian peninsula. However, the small Italian state of Sardinia, Piedmont, was looking like the strongest at the time. However, it was not able to fulfill the requirements to become one of the European greats. The first fighting took place all around the globe. France had multiple forts in Algeria and Pacific and on the African coastline. Britain had conquered the Cape Colony, had also tried many times to conquer the Dutch Cape Colony, home of the Boers, which become very important later in the story of colonialism. By this point, the slave trade, even though it's still active, was mostly coming to a close. The slave trade would end in the 1810s and would be followed by a period of slavery deteriorating, with the exception of the United States, which would rise to become the only slave state still alive. However, besides slavery, there was also the battle going on in North America, which is what we are going to discuss today. The battle in North America was actually not mostly fought by the French and British themselves, but was actually mostly fought between Native American tribes who had allegiances to both the sides. In general, most fur-trading tribes of the Great Lakes regions supported the French, while more of the more civilized British-controlled tribes, like the Mohicans and Iroquois, sided with the English. However, the Cherokee Nation, who had claimed territory that was under the jurisdiction of both countries, had allegiances to both sides, but at the same time repelled both of them. France definitely had the edge over Britain in terms of getting natives to the French, but Britain didn't care about getting natives to help. They had their own powerful army, a powerful enough army that it could defeat the base that was the French Empire. After fighting and countless flaw after flaw, the French retreated, and the 13 colonies were able to occupy a large part of the Midwest. After winning the Battle of Quebec City, General Wolfe prevailed. However, he did not live to see the city's capture. General Wolfe was killed, in the battle, along with the French commander, but it still turned out to be a British victory, as Wolfe died late in the battle, and the French were unprepared, even due to the death of the English commander. There was also significant fighting in India and, most importantly, in Europe, where Prussia was fighting enemies on every side. Prussia and England somehow survived the odds of the 7 Years' War. And with the battle at Montreal and at the battles of Montreal and Quebec City as stunning, decisive English victories, they had essentially split the French colony in two. This led to the surrender of the majority of New France. However, the English still stayed in the war, but cared much less about their Prussian allies. The other problem is that a new ruler had come of age and was ready to take the throne. About a year earlier, about around the same time this was going on, King George II of England died, supposedly on toilets. However, he was replaced by the infamous George III, who not only lost his mind, but also lost America. But that is a story for another time. But we're not done with the episode yet. Do not fret, because there's still a 7 Years' War to learn about. So, as there was still one more obstacle for the English. Even though they had defeated the French in what was French America and had repelled the native tribe, even betraying the Mohicans, there was still another obstacle that the English had to fight if they wanted to control the entirety of the Americas. And that was, of course, the Spanish. The Spanish hadn't joined the war yet, and that was good for the English, because if the Spanish joined the war, it would give the French the resources necessary to perform a counterattack on the Midwest. However, luckily, England had a plan B if Spain did join the war, or should I say the United Kingdom had a plan B. And that plan B was Portugal. Remember them? I haven't talked about them in a while. Portugal had undergone a policy of neutrality, and even though they had formed new colonies on the African coastline, they were not the great power they once were. They had lost most of their West African forts to either France or other powers, and they had become a lot less powerful. The only big thing that Portugal still had was the colony of Brazil, a colony that was very fierce, a colony that could withstand anything, and a colony that would get involved in the 7 Years' War. Spain joined the war on France's behalf after the English and the British, or as I should say, accidentally encroached on Spain's territory. Because of this, Spain joined the war and started immediately performing a counterattack on New France. However, to defend their English allies and keep their alliance going, Portugal joined the English on their side. This war between Spain and Portugal became known as the Fantastic War, even though it was anything but fantastic. Ha ha! That was a good one, wasn't it? Wasn't it? Anyways, the Spanish were able to take over some parts of the Iberian Peninsula, and minor scuffles on the borderline between Peru and Brazil occurred as well. In the end, a treaty was drafted, and the treaty terms followed. Peru would give up minor lands to Brazil, which gave it essentially the modern borders of Brazil. But Brazil in return would also give up all claims to the Cisplatina region, which would later be called Uruguay. And the other terms would be that in exchange for Florida being given to England, all of the French Mississippi colony, Louisiana colony, a division of New France, as well as all of the territories in the West that came with it, would be given directly to Spain. This was the height of the Spanish Empire's land territory, was actually the Spanish Empire's weakest point as well. The Spanish Empire had been in decline for centuries, and no longer had the resources left to expand anywhere in the New World. Plus, most territory in the New World by this point had been ratted out by other powers like Britain. The rest of the French territory was given to the 13 colonies. Now, there is actually a funny offer that the French and English had during the war. In the peace treaty, France was either forced to give the island of Guadeloupe, which was a French position stolen from the Spanish, or lose Canada. Guess which one they chose? It was Guadeloupe. However, this wouldn't be good for the English either. As I've talked about in previous videos, the English poorly, especially with George II's unpopular rule, were able to disinterest the colonists and the natives in this union. Because of this, England created a reservation to the west of the Appalachian Mountains to stop the provocation of a possible war between the colonist English and the Native Americans, which the English did not want, as they had recently suffered rebellions against the Native Americans in the Great Lakes area, and did not want another humiliating defeat to the hands of the natives. Because of this, it angered the colonists in the American continent to the point where they began to arm themselves and declare independence. After a series of taxes, it led to revolution. A revolution that would birth one of the most powerful nations in colonial history, and is often seen as both the end of the British colonial age in the Americas and the start of a new colonial age about imperializing the world. The United States was formed out of the fire it was the end result of this fury. However, the United States became one of the most powerful countries in the world, winning its independence, and with help from the French, who were thirsty for revenge, the Spanish and the Dutch, who had also suffered defeats to the English. The United States asserted its independence against their Anglo overlords. In the peace treaty, Britain was allowed to keep Canada, but in return, the French would have to pay a large deal of money. France was also given back Louisiana. However, they didn't do much with it because France was going into revolution. Partially because of the war in America, the French had gone broke, which led to the French experiencing an event that would be ingrained in the French identity, the French Revolution. When the French Revolution occurred, it not only switched the French flag from this fleur-de-lis right here to the tricolor that we're familiar with today, but also changed the way we think about Europe in modern times. Now, the Napoleonic Wars and the Wars of the Coalition are a topic for another time, but still very interesting in European history. The reason why I won't be talking about them is because that colonialism did not really occur in the Napoleonic fighting in Europe. But I say in Europe because the Napoleonic Wars did not just occur in Europe. They occurred in the Americas as well. Many colonists followed the example of the great old U.S. of A. and wanted to assert their independence against the French and the Spanish and the Portuguese. This would be the end of an age of colonialism, and it would go in fire. This was known as the Wars wars of Latin American independence, and it was a brutal and very confusing conflict. Nations declared independence left and right. But I'll just try and summarize as quick as I can what exactly happened in Latin America. Now, the situation in Latin America was very tense. Colonists, natives, independentists, and people who liked the rule of the Spanish, as well as slaves in the sugar plantations, all fought to rule over their territory. Natives saw this as a chance to gain their land back. Colonists wanted their own independent nations. Slaves saw a chance to get free and stop working in the sugar plantations. And France, which had occupied and conquered Spain due to the Napoleonic Wars, saw an opportunity to project its power in America. Not wanting to lose the ambitious Louisiana colony, it was sold to the United States. This may have provoked a second war, however, between Britain and the United States, because years later, the United States and Britain went to war during the War of 1812. The War of 1812 was very inconclusive and basically led to nothing of importance happening at all. But it was a huge blow to the British war effort on containing France. The Latin American countries also started to revolt at this time as well. With many of them declaring independence and following in the footsteps of the United States. Some of these included Haiti, which declared independence from revolutionary France, as well as Mexico, which asserted its independence from New Spain, even annexing Central America in the process, and forming the country that we all know and love today of Mexico. Mexico was not the first. Soon, Brazil declared independence as well. The colony of Peru, however, was different than Mexico or former New Spain and Brazil. The colony of Peru spanned from modern-day Venezuela to the modern-day Gulf of Rio de la Plata, and was far too big of a colony to let loose. So the colonies ended up splitting themselves into bigger nations that were a bit more manageable. Out of these nations included Peru, which became a shadow of its former self, Colombia, which became another new powerful South American nation, in Bolivia, which was actually the last South American nation to secede, and Argentina, which actually went through multiple conflicts before ever asserting its independence. And then there was also breakaway states that aimed to get their independence, like Paraguay, Uruguay, and Chile, which did eventually gain their independence. With the situation in Latin America very intense, it looked like a new wave of independentism was about to start. I have decided that it's time to put this video to a close, as after all, it is now 25 minutes long and it's getting late right now. I hope you enjoyed, but I have made a little bit of a decision. I will be stopping my History of the Americas series just because this event is kind of the end of colonialism. But that doesn't mean I will be stopping talking about the Americas. Tomorrow, probably around this time as well, I'm going to make another video which is going to be a continuation of the series which will focus on the history of the United States and the different states within the United States. And it will be on paper and it will be a lot more neater and tidier than this. I hope you enjoy. This is Matt Man signing off.